It's 2 o'clock, and I'd like to start this meeting. I'd like to start this meeting with a moment of silence for quiet reflection, please. Thank you very much. Ms. Kavish Ahmed, I just wanted to check, do we have all our do we have a quorum?
Chair, it's yes, we do.
Okay,
Thank you.
Fantastic. I'd like to welcome all in attendance, all the members of the committee, and all the guests in connection with the bill that is before us today. If I may ask that we avoid all the members everyone to mute their mics at the beginning of this and to put their videos off to save bandwidth. Members, can you flag points of order in the chat function? And participants would switch off their mics once they have finished speaking. Thank you. I'd like to take this opportunity to invite the members to introduce themselves. I'll start with me. My name is Christopher Fry, and I'm the chair of this committee on the Premier and Constitutional Matters. Member Pretorius, if you can introduce yourself, please.
Afternoon, Chair. Afternoon, fellow committee members. I'm checking in. Thank you. A member of this committee.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chairperson, and good afternoon, colleagues. My name is Gillian Postman. I'm standing in as an alternate for Member Partman.
Thank you. I do recognize Member Marie. If you could just introduce yourself for the record, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I am Peter Murray. I'm a member of this committee, and I'm the person who, on behalf of the Freedom Front Plus, tabled this bill to Parliament.
Thank you very much. Without any further ado, we'll move on to the next item of the agenda, which will be the briefing by Member Marie on the Western Cape People's Bill B4 of 2023. Member Marie, you can now conduct your introductory remarks and present the bill to the committee. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chair. I just want to mention that I will be assisted in the presentation, if need be, in terms of question answering by Dr. Corne Mulder, who is the provincial leader of the Freedom Front in the Western Cape, and he holds a BPhil in constitutional development in law. And then also there will be Advocate Gert van Niekerk, who is one of two deputy leaders alongside myself of the Freedom Front. And then we will have Mr. Phil Craig of the Cape Advocacy Group here as backup. So they will assist in answering legal constitutional questions if necessary. Now, Chair, it is an honor for me to present this bill to the committee on behalf of the Freedom Front Plus. The bill seeks to access the benefits, the universally recognized rights of all peoples all over the world to self-determination, concretizing it into South African law as it applies to the Western Cape specifically. We must be reminded that the international covenant signed by South Africa reads, all peoples have the right to self-determination and can freely determine their political status and freely pursue their economic, social, and cultural development. Now, hopefully this bill will start the process of activating Article 235 of the South African Constitution and the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights of Peoples and Minorities. And this was already ratified by the South African government on the 10th December 1998. Now, the Western Cape, the bill is called South Africa, the Western Cape People's Bill. I want to remind this committee that the People's Bill got its name from the Western Cape Constitution. Our Constitution says, we, the people of the Western Cape. That is in contrast to South Africa's Constitution, which read, we, the people of South Africa. The Constitutional Court found no problem with identifying that there is a people called the people of the Western Cape. And as such, in accordance with customary international law, I want to repeat, the injunctions of which are affirmed by our own Constitution, the people of the Western Cape shall be entitled to exercise their right to self-determination and to provide for matters incidental thereto. Now, the Western Cape is a region where there were successive waves of immigrants arriving here. The indigenous people of the Western Cape comprises of the Khoi, the San, the Griqua, the Korana. They are considered by UNESCO as indigenous and First Nation. But we acknowledge that waves of successive immigrants arrived in South Africa. And they arrived here. The Dutch came here, the French came here, the Germans came here, the British came in 1820. The Malaysian slaves came here from Malaysia. And then the isiXhosa came here. And for that reason, when we drafted the Western Cape's Constitution, which I may add, we're the only province in South Africa with our own constitution. And when we drafted it, we recognized those three groups in terms of language. We said Afrikaans, English, and isiXhosa, recognizing all three groups. Because the majority of people in the Western Cape speak Afrikaans, unlike in the other provinces. And we're happy to associate with Afrikaans. Even the Griqua said, and the Namakwalanders, our language is Afrikaans. And then we have the British English language recognized. That also makes us distinct from the other provinces. Here we love Afrikaans and we want to keep it as our language, one of 3 provincial languages. Then these people, the majority of them speak Afrikaans. It's the most widely spoken language in this province. We are disproportionately, minority groups are disproportionately balanced in the Western Cape. There's not a case where one group rules and dominates the others. And whereas the protection of minority rights is an established principle of both constitutional democracy and international law, we saw no reason why we shouldn't access the benefits of self-determination. The current system of government substantially prevents the people of the Western Cape from being governed according to their democratic will, and therefore precludes them from effectively exercising their right to self-determination as guaranteed in the South African Constitution and public international law. After the Second World War, self-determination came into its own rights, and it moved from a human right to a legal right. Therefore, it's a need to provide democratic mechanisms which will allow the people of the Western Cape to be governed according to their democratic will. The Western Cape people have expressed in consecutive elections that they are different to the other provinces. That's why the ANC majority party could not rule here or win elections here, because we don't identify with their political dogma of socialism. The Western Cape also is a very religious community, Christian, Muslim, and Jewish. And that's why our constitution in the Western Cape says, in its preamble, in humble submission to Almighty God. That is not nowhere to be found in the national constitution. The national constitution does not recognize Almighty God. It equates all different religions and beliefs, even Rastafarians, as equal to Almighty God. We don't in the Western Cape. We distinct. In the Western Cape, we pray when we open every session of Parliament. There's prayers to Almighty God in all three languages, English, Afrikaans, and isiXhosa. That doesn't happen in the national realm of politics. They don't pray there when they open Parliament. The formal recognition that the people of the Western Cape wish to be recognized as being distinct from the people of South Africa as a whole will empower the people of the Western Cape to effectively exercise their right of self-determination. Now, the purpose of this act are to give effect to the spheres of government doctrine provided for in the Constitution. We must remember no government in South Africa is subordinate to another. All are by right entitled to determine their own affairs within the competency conferred upon them by the Constitution and within the framework of the provincial constitution, of which we are the only province with a provincial constitution. And to prove this point, national government laws passed determine that each province should have one member of the provincial parliament for every 100,000 people in that province. And all the provinces followed that. Of course, there's a maximum of 80 and a minimum of 30 you might have. But if you have 80 million people, you have 80, you have 100 for every 100,000. If you have 8 million, of course, that means 80 MPs. The Western Cape already has 70.1 million people, 7.1 million. Not 77.1 million. But we only have 42 MPs and not 71. Because we have a constitution that determines how much MPs we want in the province, and courts have ruled it's our prerogative. And we wanted to save money for the people of the Western Cape, because we haven't up till now taken 71 MPs. We only have 42. Again, our distinctiveness. Here in the Western Cape, we sing Afrikaanse liedjies. We have the Cape Coon Carnival. No other province has a Cape Coon Carnival in New Year's. We have the Christmas choirs. We love music. We are musical people. We are sea-loving people. We have the beaches. That's why tourists flock here. We're distinct. Everybody wants to come to the Cape. Speaker, the sources of international law provided for in Article 38.1 of the Statute of the International Court of Justice of 1946. ANC agreed to that. The African Charter on Human and People's Rights were also ratified by South Africa on the 9th of July 1996. And this African Charter of Human and People's Rights states that all peoples have the right to exist, that their right to self-determination is unquestionable. I want to repeat. The African Charter on Human and People's Rights, ratified by South Africa on the 9th of July 1996, states, all peoples have the right to exist, that their right to self-determination is unquestionable and inalienable, and that they can freely pursue their economic and social development according to the policy they have freely chosen. Western Cape must be able to freely choose its own policies, not be dominated by a national majority they never elected and chose. Then the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights was also ratified by South Africa. The International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights was also ratified by South Africa as recently as the 12th of January 2015. And this covenant states, all peoples have the right to self-determination, and by virtue of that right, they can freely determine their political status and freely pursue their economic, social, and cultural development. The people of the Western Cape, therefore, recognized and identified as the Western Cape people, shall be recognized as unique with their own culturally, linguistic, and ideologically distinct values. That is what this bill is all about. Accessing rights that already exist in South Africa's constitution and rights international recognized in international covenants and laws. Our right to self-determination is not dependent on the discretion of a minister at national level, like the DA's power bill is. Our right to self-determination is based on both the South African Constitution, international conventions, and international law. It's a right which seeks recognition. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Member Marais, for that. I just wanted to, before we go move any further, I wanted to acknowledge the member class. Member class, if you could just introduce yourself for the record, please.
Thank you, Chair. Member class, I apologize for coming late, but it was not just because of the load shedding, but I drove to other area that is not affected by the load shedding. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Member Class. I appreciate that. Members, I will now open the floor for questions to the presentation and the bill. Members, are there any questions? If you could raise your hand in the chat box function. I see Member Class. I have a few questions myself. Member Pretorius. I think we'll start there. Member Class, if you could go ahead, please. Member Class?
Chairperson,
Yes, I
Can
can
I
hear
talk?
you. Yes, you can,
yes,
sir.
Yes, I did cancel my hand, and now I can talk.
Yes, you can, sir.
Yeah. Chairperson, I don't support this bill. The person first that they sent for this bill, it doesn't speak exactly about the bill. It talks about Africans, and they know this is a rainbow nation country. And when it talks about Africans, it is clear that he wants us to go back to square one, where we want to have a province with their own language, with lots of people that are residing in that province. Two, when this bill is for us, why is always specify a certain individual race, but now he wants us have a state of a certain individual people, because the state that he's talking about is not a true reflection of Rainbow Nation. He's just sent to locate Western Cape as a state. He wants to locate Western Cape as the country of which that it will lead us to leave the Western Cape, because we cannot sit where the laws that we have fought for, we have died for, in order to be abolished and not to be used anymore. I don't know, because this is one in the parliament. It speaks that all these things will happen, and that can assist him to speak this thing Tara. Yes, we can say that the Western Cape is my state, but when it comes to the languages, race, and all that stuff, which means that you want to put your own state in another state, which means you want to build country in another country. I can't even dwell too much to the fact, but honestly, he must go and consult through the people that they know. When you talk about this thing, what does it mean? So in other words, that I ask the question, why you want only Africans? Two, why is it possible that is it the Rainbow Nation country that is talking about, or is talking about only a race? How can the South Africa itself can be on the state of race? Other question will be raised soon the times goes on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Member Class. Member Pretorius. Member Pretorius. Member Pretorius, you're on mute. One more time. Ms. Kamish Ahmed, I assume you can hear me?
I can hear you. I can hear you, Chair.
Okay. I will then go on to my question. The stats, the statistics that Afrikaans is the most widely spread language in the province. What is that based on, and can we get some more information as to where that statistic has come from? And secondly, is this a view towards are we talking about self-determination with a view towards independence, or what exactly is the goal of this bill? I'm not too sure that I'm fully understanding that one. So stats based and the goal of the bill. I'm not too sure exactly, even though I've read the impact and the objects of the bill, I'm not sure myself still. Member Bosman?
Thank you, Chairperson. Chair, I'd also like to just follow up on that question that you asked now. What is Member Murray asking with this piece of legislation? I've given the bill a cursory read, and some items there are already enshrined in both the provincial constitution as well as the national constitution. So Member Murray can maybe just expand a bit more on the objectives of this bill, and also what Member Murray is asking this committee to do. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much, Member Bosman. Member Pretorius, can you hear me now?
Thank you. I can hear you. My apologies. Momentarily. May I proceed, Chair?
Yes, you are. You were breaking up a bit, but now you're much better.
Chair, I suppose they could make out, or a case could be made out for a lot of techniques to be addressed here, and it's one side of it. The other side is, I don't go into semantics, but I read Bill, I read federalism, I read about self-determination, I read about provincial autonomy. What exactly is being sought here? Those are three constitutional concepts. And you excuse my ignorance, but I'm not sure that these three together or that they stand alone. What are Chair? Thank you.
Thank you very much. If you're able to, can you just repeat that in the chat box, Member Pretorius, because it did break up a little. So if you could repeat that in the chat box, I'd appreciate that. And Ms. Kamish Ahmed, if you can just alert me when that happens. Thank you very much. Member Maria, over to you.
Yes. The some questions asked is actually all in the bill. I get the impression the members didn't read this bill. They came here hoping to get something to latch onto, because anybody who reads the bill wouldn't ask me what is the bill about. I've never heard such a thing. Normally, Mr. Pretorius, what the bill is about is in the preamble to the bill. And if you read the bill, you would know what the bill is about. Now, it says to formally record the will of the people of the Western Cape, first of all, to be identified as a people who, in accordance with customary international law, the injunctions of which are affirmed in the South African Constitution, shall be entitled to exercise their right in self-determination and to provide for matters incidental thereto. Now, anybody who knows something about constitutional law and international law would know what the definition of self-determination is. And I expected members to come to this meeting knowing what self-determination means, and I don't have to explain it. After the Second World War, a lot of countries under colonial rule broke away from the colonialists, and they wanted to rule over themselves. And some became independent, some became self-governing. Others seek federations. And that battle is still going on. The United Nations gave recognition to peoples not to be dominated minorities, not to be dominated by ethnic cultural majorities. And they have the right to determine their own future. hence the word self-determination. And we saw the Soviet Union breaking up into 15 countries. We saw England breaking away from England, India breaking away from England. They want self-determination. And you saw Pakistan breaking away from India and Bangladesh from Pakistan. That is one form of self-determination, but there's other forms. It can be regional self-determination. It can be trust areas, trust groups like the Trankra groups, which we have, which were missionary stations. Those people have the right to claim back their land, which is held in trust on their behalf. They have the right to determine whether they want to live under the municipality, whether the government must hold their land in trust, or whether the land must be assigned to them. And already that process is busy. The ANC is busy with that process. I'm speaking to the National Minister and to the Deputy, Mr. Squatcher, all the time about it. They're having referendums in all these 23 formerly missionary stations, which is now Trankra land, asking them what form of self-determination do they want. Are members in this committee so ill-informed as not to know this is already going on? Self-determination is not necessarily secession. It's only one form. You have federal autonomy. It's another form of self-determination. People in that province or state determine their own future, their own laws, their own rights. Look at the American states, the 51 states. Look at Germany. Look at Belgium. Look at the canton system in Switzerland. That's all areas, even India. All these places have decided that the majority ethnic cultural group has no right to dominate the minority groups. That each minority with their own culture, their own language, and their own lifestyle should have the final say over their affairs and not be dominated by the dominant group. That is self-determination. I thought the members would come here fully informed. Now, I never spoke about Afrikaans being the only language. I think even member Klaas never read this bill. We said that all three languages have equal status in the Western Cape. English, Afrikaans, and isiXhosa. I'm surprised that members can serve on this committee and haven't even read this bill.
I would like to ask thank you, Member Maria. I'd like to just answer my question on what was the stats based that you used the stats on.
SA Stats. I can't, SA Stats. We have South African Statistic Department, and I think, Honourable Member, Chairperson, you might just inquire from SA Stats if what I'm saying is true or not, because they say Afrikaans is the most widely spoken language in the Western Cape. Go to Bonteheuwel, Elkjes River, go to Mitchells Plain, go to Atlantis, go to Manenberg, go to Delft. And you ask the people what language they speak. And the majority of people in the Western Cape are colored community. Go to Boekap and see what language do they speak. Afrikaans. I don't even need stats to tell me that.
Thank you, sir. Member Bosman? Member Bosman?
Chairperson, contrary to what Member Murray is saying, some of us, we've actually read this bill and we've also received quite a lot of correspondence from the advocacy group set up to advance the specific agenda. In the preamble to the bill, or the first paragraph in the bill, it says that the bill wants to formally record the will of the people. Now, the question I asked is, what information do we have that it is the will of the people of the Western Cape for this piece of legislation to formally record their will? What type of research was done to identify what the will of the people of the Western Cape is? That's the first question. And then if Member Murray can perhaps talk to us specifically around the sections that are already covered in the South African Constitution as well as the Western Cape Provincial Constitution? Are we not just duplicating aspects that are already in supreme law?
I want to answer the Honourable Bosman as follows. Formally means it is written and is proof of it, of the will of the people. That can only happen if there's going to be a referendum. It doesn't say in the preamble, we have already recorded the will. The bill intends to formally record the will. We have a good idea of what that will is because we've done our own research, but we want to formalize it. And there's no better way to formalize anything to who the people support than an election. Then it's formal. Everybody can say, I vote ANC, but if you come to the polling day and they lost, it hasn't been formally recognized and recorded. So formal recognition and recording means the DA should have the will to call a referendum on the issue of self-determination, which the provincial, Western Cape Provincial Constitution make provision for the Premier to call a referendum on the issue. That is what I understand by to formally record the will of the people. That means hold a referendum on the issue of self-determination.
Thank you very much, members. Are there any other further questions to the bill and to Member Murray?
Yeah, thank you, Chair.
Yes, Member Klaas.
Yeah, Chair, I do not understand why he said we didn't read the bill, but the bill is with us and we are attending the bill. The fact of the bill, and the bill needs the state or the Western Cape to be on its own in the country. And I asked that question. There's many provinces here. If this bill of him succeeds, we will have to build a racial differences to the people. Even no matter he answered the issue of Afrikaans, when I said to him that Afrikaans, it can be the media or it can be the language. When he answered me, he talked about Xhosas. There's Xhosas, there's that people. Xhosa. And then he want him to be with him and speak his language that he want. That is why I said this question for him is easy to answer. That's why I said to him, the problem is alone. And he wants this thing to implement. And he's got no support in anything on that. He's supposed to first, as being asked, did you go to the ground? Did you explain and come with the views of the people? No. He said yes. But the question is that, prove for us, how did you do public hearings and all that? Because this thing comes from the party. It doesn't come from the government. The government can't himself and go run for his bill, for the bill of his own party and spend the money for his bill. He's supposed to make sure and bring evidence to us. I did do public hearings. I did talk to community. Here is the proof. Not just come up and say that because he knows he's got an experience of being leading a long time. We are not talking about the experience of leading. We are talking about what language you preferred is the language that brings damage in the country. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Member. Advocate Leroux.
Chairperson, yes, thank you for the opportunity. I know it's a bit unusual for legal support to speak in the introductory briefings. Usually we keep our comments for a bit later. However, Chairperson, I think this is an important issue, and I thought it was fair to ask the question while the the relevant advisors, etc., everybody is in attendance. Chairperson, if I may, with your leave, just flight section 235 of the Constitution, because I want to ask a question about that, and I think it would be useful if everybody can see what I'm looking at while I do so.
You can do so.
Chairperson, let me also just introduce myself. I think some of the participants. My name is Andre Leroux. I'm the
Chair, did you lose sound?
35.
I lost sound too.
Chair, can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
Can I ask whether news 235 as flighted?
No, I'm just seeing your desktop, sir.
That is okay. Chair, I'll keep it, and I can see it flighted on my screen, but I will read the section. It's section 235 of the National Constitution. Pardon my voice. I'm going to go as I speak. The section is titled Self-Determination, and it reads, it's quite a long section. It reads, the right of the South African people as a whole, determination as manifested in this Constitution, does not preclude, within the framework of this right, recognition of the notion of the right to self-determination of any community sharing a common cultural and language heritage within a territorial entity in the Republic of South Africa, in the Republic or in any other way, and then comma. And my comments is going to pause on these last four words. The last four words in the section, and I'm sure everybody is familiar with this since we are having a conversation about self-determination. The words are determined by national legislation. And Chairperson, I'm gonna make some observations because I feel I just need to give context to I think it's quite clear that the bill concerns self-determination. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, the expression self-determination appears 33 times in the bill and in the memorandum on the objects of the bill. So I think I think it's everybody here will agree that it is the purpose of the bill to or the subject matter of the bill to provide for self-determination. Now, what the Constitution provides is that when it comes to the issue of self-determination, and I think this is fairly evident, I don't think one needs to make any particularly complicated legal arguments. I think anybody that reads the section will be able to see what it says. But that self-determination is something to be determined by national legislation. Now, to me, that says two things. And of course, the reason I'm raising this is because I would like to hear what other views there may be. But I think the first thing that it suggests to me is that contrary to what is being asserted in the bill and the memorandum on the objects of the bill, the issue of self-determination is clearly not an exclusive provincial legislative competence. I think that is quite clear from section 235. In fact, I'll take it further, and I will say that what section 235 provides makes it very clear that the issue of self-determination is, in fact, in the national legislative competence. Now, one can have a long conversation about constitutional interpretation. I'm not going to do that, but I will make the following observation that, usually one would deal with interpretation if there is ambiguity in the legal text that one is looking at, and there's more than one reasonable interpretation. Now, firstly, I don't think that there is any ambiguity in what Section 235 of the Constitution says textually. I think it is very clear that what the Constitution says is that the issue of self-determination must be determined by national legislation. It says it clearly, it says it explicitly. Even if one were to look at a purposive interpretation approach, as the Constitutional Court would encourage us to do, Constitutional Court will also tell us look at the Constitution as a whole, etc., etc. I think it is quite evident what the Constitution is saying in terms of Section 235. So, on my reading, the following: it seems to me as though this bill is in the wrong legislature. I don't think there's any question that the right to self-determination is recognized in Section 235 of the National Constitution. I also think it is quite clear that the issues of self-determination must be determined in terms of national legislation. So in that sense, I would suggest that this province or any other province does not have the legislative competence to make a law on self-determination, and that the Constitution makes it quite clear that that must be determined by national legislation. Chairperson, that was a bit of a statement, but the reason I raised that is to get some, to hear from the member in charge on what their views are on that. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you. Before I allow Member Marie to continue, can I ask Member Bosman?
Thank you, Chairperson. Chair, I just want to go back to my earlier question as well, again, around the will of the people. And Member Mare's response was that it is the will of the people. And I just want to ask, is Member Mare speaking on behalf of his political party? Because if my recollection is correct, from the 2019 general election outcomes, the Member Mare's party received 1.6% of the vote. So I'd hardly consider that the will of the people. And I think also we might need to, in our resolutions, ask for a specific legal opinion on the bill based on what Advocate Leroux has just also informed us, because we do need this bill to fall within the functional areas of exclusive competence of the Western Cape Provincial Legislature in order for us to make any decisions on it. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Member Marais?
Speaker, I wanted to give Dr. Corney and others a chance, but the questions are so simplistic. I'm going to give it a go. First of all, we don't disagree with Advocate Leroux. Otherwise, we wouldn't have referred to 235. I mean, a first-year law student could have picked that up, that it must be determined by national legislation. But if we can first convince national legislation that the will of the people in a referendum determined that they want self-determination and to be recognized as a people, then only will that kick in, that we will approach national government to say, will they pass such legislation? It's obvious. I mean, nobody need to tell us that it must be determined by national law. We know. That's why we wrote it in the bill. 235 says it must be determined by national legislation, but it does not it does not wipe out 235, the right of people who have a common culture and language to have self-determination. It just says what the process will be to achieve it. So yes, we agree it must be by national legislation, but we must first set the thing in motion by proving that is the will of the people to have self-determination. Now, as far as Mr. Bosman is concerned, he keep on harping on the will of the people, and I want to read it, maybe English, maybe I should read the Afrikaans one. To formally, not guessing, not wishy-washing, to formally record the will of the people of the Western Cape to be identified as a people. We want to record that so the question in a referendum will become a record of what that will is. Now he talks, how much votes did you get? How much votes did that one get? He forgets that DA got didn't get 51% votes in the metros in Gauteng, but they still represent now the will of metros in Gauteng because of coalition of parties. So don't bring numbers here into account. The will of the people is not expressed through one political party alone. The will of the people can also be expressed through the will of 5 or 6 parties who have the same will.
Thank you very much, Member Murray. Mr. Craig, we don't.
Chairperson?
Yes, Member Bosman.
Before we just drift off from this topic, I just want some clarity from Member Murray, because I'm going on the documentation that he earlier accused us of not reading.
Yes.
Member Murray, in point 5.4 of his memorandum, says that provincial election results have established majority public support for increased provincial autonomy. But now Member Murray is saying we shouldn't take provincial election results into account. So I'm a little bit confused by that. So if Member Murray could maybe tell me whether we should be taking provincial electoral support into account, because in the purest technical terms, a general election is a referendum. The people expresses their will for the political party that they choose to run the specific province. So I think we mustn't insult the voters or insult members of parliament when they're trying to engage. And then a follow-up question, Chair, in the section on consultation on the bill prior to its introduction, it says there that the Western Cape Premier and the Western Cape government were invited from its conception to give input into the bill. Can Member Murray perhaps share what that input was that came from the Western Cape government as well as from the Premier of the Western Cape? Thanks, Chair.
I would like to give over to Dr. Corné Mulder now and Mr. Phil Craig, who conducted any discussions that did happen. Dr. Corné, are you online?
Yes, Mr. Murray, I'm available.
Please, the question is, what discussions did we have with other parties before we...
Member Murray? I'm going to allow Dr. Mulder and Mr. Craig to speak because I know that they're above them, that they were part of the thing, but please can we follow the procedure? Dr. Mulder, you may go ahead now, sir.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Thank you for the opportunity. If you will allow me, I will try to assist to bring some clarity with regard to some of these questions that were put to Mr. Murray. I think it's important that we get clarity on these issues. First of all, I want to say from my side, I think it's historic and I think it's very important that the committee today deals with a bill such as this, because I would like to believe and hope to believe that the representatives in the Western Cape Parliament are there because they are looking out and are representing the will of the people of the Western Cape. That is what they are supposed to do. Now, when it comes to the specific bill, I listened. Now, if you give me an opportunity, I would just want to run through some of these questions. Mr. Klaas referred to the whole question of Afrikaans. I don't know why he's doing that, Honourable Klaas, because the bill is quite clear. It's not a question of Afrikaans and creating self-determination for Afrikaans. It specifically refers to the recognized languages in the Western Cape, recognized by the Western Cape Constitution. So it's not a question of Afrikaans or not Afrikaans. That's part of that reality. And it may be interesting to note that the majority of Afrikaans speakers in South Africa are not white people, but be that as it may. And that's where the percentages comes from. It comes from Stats South Africa. It's common knowledge that the majority of speakers in the Western Cape does have Afrikaans as a home language. But the argument is not about a specific language. It's about accommodating the recognized languages as part of the whole concept of self-determination. Now, the fact is, I would think that the Parliament of the Western Cape would be very supportive of the idea that the will of the people of the Western Cape be assisted to be expressed. This bill does not say that it represents the will. It says there should be a formal process where the will of the people of the Western Cape can give expression through because of such a bill. And I don't think there's any doubt. I didn't hear anybody say that. I almost think there's acceptance of the fact that something does exist called the peoples of the Western Cape. I think that's the reality. And if you look at the situation in South Africa, 9 provinces, only 1 passes a constitution. Only 1. The other 8 provinces did not think it's necessary to have an own constitution. And maybe colleagues will not see it that way. But the mere fact that the Western Cape was able to pass such a constitution and that it was certified by the Constitutional Court is already an expression of self-determination. Secondly, the fact of the matter is that if you talk about the point that Honourable Borman made, now I don't know Honourable Borman from which party Mr. Borman is, but that's not important. If he refers to 5.4, which says provisional election results have established majority public support for increased provincial autonomy, I think that is correct. Because as we went into the last provincial election, the Democratic Alliance, who won the election, was very strongly in favour of provincial autonomy. I remember the posters, own policing, own rail service. So it's a factual statement that the majority of the population is in favour of at least autonomy. Autonomy is also a form of self-determination. If I could come to the points made by Advocate Leroux, and there was also then said maybe we should get a legal opinion. My view on legal opinions are exactly what they say. It's an opinion. And if legal opinions were the alpha and omega and the final word, we won't have court cases. Quite often, I will have a legal opinion and somebody else will have a legal opinion on the same legal provisions and facts, exactly the opposite. Those things end in court. Section 235 is not the provision that this bill relies on. If you look at the documentation, it doesn't say we call on Section 235. It doesn't say that. It refers to the fact that self-determination as a principle is recognized in the Constitution, but the emphasis is placed on international law and all the covenants that's being signed by government and has become part of our law and international practice in terms of the exercise of the right to self-determination. And then there are the questions about what is this about? Is this about an independent state or is this about secession? Nowhere in this bill refers to any of those things. It refers to the right to self-determination. And then if you do a study about self-determination, you'll find that there are different forms of self-determination. It could be regional autonomy. It could be the right, it could be cultural decisions being taken. And if you look at some of the provisions in the Western Cape Constitution, it already makes provision for that kind of self-determination. But surely, if we are interested in the will of the people of the Western Cape, and we all should, I guess, be interested in that will, then it will be up to the people in the Western Cape to express that will and to say, this is what we think, this is how we feel about that, and express themselves in terms of how far they would like to go in terms of self-determination or in terms of not how far they would like to go. So the objects of the bill is quite clear. The preamble is quite clear in stating what it basically says. It says it's necessary to do what? To record the will of the people. The bill doesn't say what the will is, but there must be a mechanism to record the will of the people, to be identified as a people. And maybe the committee could express themselves. Do they or don't they see the people of the Western Cape as a people? I think the Constitution of the Western Cape recognized that, and I think there's a clear indication. The fact that you call your legislature a parliament, like all other 8 provinces call them a legislature. In all other 8 provinces, they are members of the legislature. In the Western Cape, they are members of parliament. It indicates to me, and unlike the South African Constitution, where we've got 11 and now 12 officially recognized languages, the Western Cape talks about 3 recognized languages. It seems we are talking about the people here that have opted for different mechanisms and structures within the process. And then it refers in the preamble to, in accordance with custom international law, the injunctions of which are affirmed to the South African Constitution. And it says what should then come from this. They should be entitled to exercise the right to self-determination and to provide for matters incidental thereto. And that is what it's about. So I think the question, Chairperson, is, does the Parliament of the Western Cape, who in their constitution recognizes the people of the Western Cape, do the constitutional process in the Western Cape see the Western Cape people as a people? Or do you want to send a message to the people of the Western Cape that you do not recognize them as a people in their own right? And if you say they are a people in their own right, and one can deny that, and tell the people of the Western Cape that you do not think that they are a people, if you recognize that right, they are entitled to self-determination. The will of the people of the Western Cape would express the contents of what that self-determination means. And then the majority could come along and say, no, we don't want secession. We don't want a separate state, but we want federalism, or we want autonomy. And I've got an idea that the ruling party in the Western Cape currently pushes the question of autonomy very strongly so. A bill was brought recently to the same committee, if I'm not mistaken, on more powers for the Western Cape. That's a form of self-determination. But if you want to be successful, you first need to recognize that such a people does exist. I think the committee perhaps should start there. But let me conclude then. Thank you, Chairperson, for the opportunity. I really think it's a very important and historical day that we as a province are addressing or discussing this issue. And with regard to 235, the last point, when the Constitutional Court certified the current Constitution, the point they made was that the drafters of the Constitution decided to keep the issue of self-determination open. And that's why Section 235 is framed in that fashion. And the Constitutional Court in its judgment says it was kept open by the political side of the whole process because it's something that can be addressed or should be addressed through a political process going into the future. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Dr. Mulder. Excuse me about that. Sorry about that. Member Class, I'm going to acknowledge you just after Mr. Craig, because Member Marie did ask that Mr. Craig, as part of his delegation, also give input. So, Mr. Craig, I'm going to ask that you give your input now, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate it, and I wasn't sure of the format, so apology if I overstepped by putting my hand up earlier. Look, I think Dr. Mulder has provided a lot of clarification on a number of the issues, but I would just reiterate some of those questions very simply. This is a very, very simple bill, and I think we mustn't try to overcomplicate it. There are only really three components of this bill. First of all, that a Western Cape people exist, and whilst people may have different views on that, there's a constitutional reality. The very first line of the Western Cape Constitution says, "We, the people of the Western Cape." So constitutionally, the Western Cape people exist. The second point is, as a people, they're entitled to self-determination. How? Because we know that the South African Parliament post-1994 has on 3 separate occasions ratified the right that all people have the right to self-determination. All people includes the Western Cape people. So those two things are just constitutional. This bill isn't changing anything there. It's just highlighting that these two constitutional realities exist. There is a Western Cape people and they have a right to self-determination. What this bill then does is ask the Western Cape people through its elected parliament, the Western Cape Parliament, do they want to exercise that right to self-determination? And I think here comes back to with a lot of questions about what is the purpose of the bill. The purpose of this bill is to establish whether the Western Cape people want to exercise a right to self-determination or whether they don't want to exercise a right to self-determination. And we then just have to understand, what does self-determination mean? And self-determination, when we strip away everything, simply means, do the people of Western Cape want to be able to make decisions for themselves, or are they willing to forego the right to make decisions for themselves and accept decisions made by the South African people as a whole as an alternative? And that's what we're deciding here. The Western Cape Parliament is deciding, does it want to claim the right for the Western Cape people to make decisions for themselves, which may include taking control of the police, it may control fixing the railway systems, it may creating federalism. Do we want to claim that control, or do we want to continue, as in the current system, allowing the people of the Western Cape to make those decisions for us? And in this situation where we are now, where for 30 years, the majority of Western Cape voters have never once been governed by the national government they voted for. So therefore, at present, the Western Cape people are not exercising the right to self-determination. We would move that they will be much, much better off if they exercise the right to self-determination. And I would be totally amazed if the party of government in the Western Cape would vote down the right to self-determination, having been elected on trying to exercise the right to self-determination, or be in a different way. So I think that's the essence of that bill, these three things. And I think it's worth touching on Section 2352, because I heard the comments of Advocate Naru. Let's go back to those international charters that South Africa has signed, and international law, and of course the South African Constitution recognises international law, and just remember that the right to self-determination is undeniable. It's a just Kogan's right in international law, and it's inalienable. So therefore, there can't be a situation where South Africa could decide that the Western Cape people don't have a right to self-determination. And therefore, whether Section 235 appears in the Constitution or doesn't appear in the Constitution is actually irrelevant, because all people have a right to self-determination, and South Africa has already ratified and sworn to uphold that right. So the Western Cape people have a right to self-determination, whether it appears in Section 235 or not. And clearly, if we just think it through logically and put aside legal brains for a moment, it can't possibly be that the South African National Parliament decides whether the Western Cape people have self-determination. It wouldn't be self-determination, it would be determination. Clearly, the Western Cape Parliament must decide whether it wants to, on behalf of the Western Cape people, whether it wants to exercise self-determination. The role then, when we come to national parliament, is how does that get carried out? So let's assume now that the Western Cape people vote in favour of self-determination, and they say they want to exercise that self-determination by taking control of their own police force because they're not happy with the current arrangements. Then they must propose that bill in the National Assembly, and they will exercise this self-determination that they claimed provisionally, but they will exercise it nationally. And I hope that carries up to those 3 points. We are a people, we have a right to self-determination, and what this bill asks is do we want to claim that right on behalf of the Western Cape people, or do we want to continue to cede that right to the people of South Africa as a whole? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Craig. Member Class?
Thank you, Chairperson. Chairperson, the more they explain, the more I feel that really they are up to something. One, self-determination, it's also the part said autonomy. When you talk about autonomy, he said that means you are lead under the leadership. You want to do your own thing under the leadership. What does it mean for them? They said that the Western Cape would be controlled by them rather than they are under. That is why when they talk about language, they said they are not talking about language, one language. But honestly, the South Africa sit down and took decision about the 11 languages. Now, when they are in the autonomous specific language that they want to, that I'm not talking now about Afrikaans. I said they want, which means they to lead the country. Okay, they want to lead the Western Cape, and they want, that's what they said all the time, let the people of the Western Cape do the will, their own will. Which means that kills, I make an example, the ANC. They give the ANC Youth League the autonomy right. Now it's where Julius didn't listen to them because they believe they've got their own right. In the Western Cape, I want to tell you, we are differ with other countries, even with the number plate. We are differ with other countries with the payments. In other words, they want to add now again something that will make us not feel comfortable who are coming from other provinces in the Western Cape. What I can say now is that you're speaking this very night nicely in divisive. And when you divide your own people, tomorrow there'll be one or two things that will let now the South Africa itself recognize that there is something that is happening. This is what we are discussing. We know there are also people who want their own places to create, and they've got also their self-currents. Western Cape to do that, you will see that currents. Mr. Murray, He's trying now to get the power. After that, the Western Cape, for them to be, is not known by us. It's because when they agree with the constitution, they allow that the province has a right to approve their constitution. Only the others, they are just lazy not to do that because they will be same as the Western Cape. So what I'm saying is that if you say this thing of the language is not what I'm trying to explain, it's not only Afrikaans. There's a lot of languages here. There are 11. So if you want to deviate from the 11 languages, it is clear when Andre Leroux explained to you that it needs that determination to be done by national. Even for approving the Western Cape to stand themselves as the premiers and the ministers, it has been determined by the national. Now, if we as the Western Cape allow that to happen, it will be clear tomorrow we will see running away from our own Western Cape and lying to people and saying that let us go. But what I can say just to conclude is that you're speaking this thing very nice, but it's decisive. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Class Member Bosman.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chair, I think we have to say that, I'd like to say that by arguing that if we as the representatives of the people of the Western Cape does not support this bill, we don't agree that the Western Cape is a people. That's a false equivalence. I think the Western Cape and the people of the Western Cape are very clear on their identity as people from the Western Cape and people who reside in the Western Cape. And we have various pieces of legislation that protects that cultural identity of the people of the Western Cape. And we've got a Western Cape Cultural Commission as well as a Western Cape Language Commission that protects and advocates and ensures that those rights are protected. And I think also arguing that devolution equals independence is another false equivalence, because it doesn't. And I think we need to be mindful of the fact that we are not the only representatives of the people of the Western Cape. The Western Cape is represented in the National Assembly by parliamentarians from the Western Cape, and the people of the Western Cape are also represented in the National Council of Provinces through our representatives in the NCOP. So if legislation around a referendum needs to be made, as the Constitution outlines in 235, that it's national competency, that can be done, and it can be argued for in that house as well. But I think what we need to be very clear on as well is Dr. Mulder might not place much faith and value in legal opinions, but they're important tools that we use to guide our decision making. So as a way forward, I'd like to propose that we get a legal opinion from our parliamentary legal services on the constitutionality of this piece of legislation, and as well as whether it's within our provincial powers to make this type of legislation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Member Bosman. I'm going to, members, are there any further questions or comments?
I see Dr. Corney's hand.
Yes, Member Maria, I do see Dr. Mulder's hand. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to allow you to do the closing remarks. And if any members of your team would like to make a closing remark, but please a closing remark, then you are free to do so. Thank you, Member Maria.
I'm not sure whether you want Dr. Corney first to speak. I would prefer.
No, you first, sir.
My closing remark is to not only this committee, but it's also to the people out there who's listening in on social media. The DA's powers bill, which they tried to get through the same committee, speaks of the devolution of powers now held by national ministers to the provincial ministers because the argument is we can do it more efficiently. Police, transport, etc. We can do a better job, so we want those powers. That is subsidiarity, which in other words is also a form of self-determination, determining your own quality of policing and your own quality of transportation. So I would find it very difficult if the DA now turns around and says, but although we wanted more powers, we are not going to support self-determination of the Freedom Front because they also want more powers. That would be a long thing for the voters to swallow. All I want to say is this bill is simple. We want to access a right that already exists in the South African Constitution, a right to self-determination. We also want to access rights which is given to us in terms of international conventions and law, which the ANC government has already ratified. We don't have to convince or sell it to them. It's now time that they allow those powers to be activated. Thank you.
Thank you. The rest of your team? Dr. Mulder?
Yes, thank you, Chairperson. I just want to make sure that I understood Mr. Borman correctly. I don't want the committee to take decisions on perhaps a misunderstanding. Did I understand Mr. Borman to say that it's a fallacy to equate evolution with independence? Did I understand him correctly when he said that? I just want to make sure, because if he did, I would like to respond to that, please.
Okay, before I allow that, it's Member Bosman, by the way, not Member Borman. Mr. Craig, your final comment, please.
Thank you. Yes, it was just a very quick comment to say that if we accept, and actually the member Borman did, thankfully, to concede that there's a Western Cape people, and clearly there is, and they have a right to self-determination, then clearly there's no other. So if anyone were to argue that the Western Cape Parliament wasn't the correct place for the Western Cape people to exercise their right to self-determination, where on earth would it be? Where would be? There's no other place that specifically is created in the Constitution to give voice to the Western Cape people. Clearly, the right to self-determination belongs within the Western Cape Parliament, because that is the elected assembly that exclusively represents the Western Cape people. And if we get to a referendum on whatever issue, then only the Western Cape Premier is empowered to call a provincial referendum. So clearly self-determination, in whichever form it is, devolution, federalism, independence, or whatever else, belongs in the Western Cape Parliament. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor van Niekerk, you haven't spoken before, but because you're part of the team, I will allow you to make a closing remark before I get Member Bosman to provide clarity on his statement. Councillor van Niekerk.
Thank you very much, Chair, for the opportunity. All I want to do is actually just wrap up also as part of our conclusion with regards to what Mr. Klaas has stated. And first and foremost, this bill concerns the people of the Western Cape, not of the Republic of South Africa. Then furthermore, with regards to the language, Section 5 of the Western Cape Constitution pertains languages. And I can read, for purpose of provincial government, the official languages Afrikaans, English, and isiXhosa are to be used, and these languages enjoy equal status. So there's no we, them, they. There's only us in this. Then furthermore, if you look at the preamble of this Western Cape People's Bill, in the third clause of the preamble, it clearly states and give recognition to all groups, and such as Dutch, German, French, Malay, British, Xhosa, and other cultural groups. And then in line with the Western Cape Constitution, give recognition to Afrikaans, English, and isiXhosa as the formal languages. And as far as the stats is concerned, Stats South Africa says that 49% of the people of the Western Cape speaks Afrikaans. Thank you very much for the opportunity, Chair.
Thank you very much, Member Bosman.
Thanks, Chairperson. Chair, I never used the word fallacy. I used the words false equivalence. And I think also, just to state, I never said the Western Cape Provincial Parliament doesn't have the exclusive rights to speak on behalf of the Western Cape people. I think we need to firstly acknowledge that we are all South African citizens, but we are also people of the Western Cape, and we can be both, and many of us live happily as both. And I think we need to be very clear that South Africa is not a federal state. We've got a national legislative body, and then we've got a provincial legislative body, and we also have local legislative bodies. So I think we just need to be very clear on that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, everybody, for your input and for your input on this matter. Member May, thank you for introducing the bill to the committee. You and your team are free to exit the meeting, as we will now consider and deliberate on the bill and do some committee work in terms of adopting some minutes and reports and some resolutions and actions. So thank you very much. Members, if you could stay behind for the meeting, please.
Chair, can you tell me if there's a quorum?
There is a quorum, sir.
Why do you exclude me?
Oh, sorry. That you are free to stay as a member of the committee. I apologize.
Okay. Thank you, Doctor. Thank you, Gert. Thank you, Phil.
Members, what we will do is we will now move on to resolutions and actions considering the draft on the bill and any other resolutions and actions. There has been one that we drafted that we requested legal opinion on the bill. There was a proposal, therefore. Is there a seconder for that proposal, or is that considered a resolution?
Yes, I will support that legal opinion is sought. We did that with the Powers Bill. Just right that we do it with the People's Bill as well.
Thank you. Sorry, Member Murray. Member Pretorius had his hand up first. Member Pretorius?
You can ignore my hand, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Member Klaas?
Yeah, I second the legal opinion. Yeah, the reason is that we must not now, when there is a dissection amongst us, and then we need the legality and the explanations are true, while we understand clear that this is autonomy. So I agree with the legal opportunity. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, members. Are there any further actions or resolutions pertaining to that members would like to bring up? Yes, Member Murray?
Chair, I think I don't know whether you still see Advocate Gert van die Kerk. Is he still online or not?
No, he's not, sir.
Oh, he's not, so. I just want from my side to thank the committee. It was important that we had discussed this, because the two bills, the only thing that stopped the DA's Powers Bill was the legalities of it. And the only thing now that could be able to stand in the way, if we didn't follow legal prescriptions and constitutional laws in respect of it. And so I welcome the decision of this committee to refer it to their own legal structures for comments. I'll eagerly await that, Chair. And thank you for the way you also conducted this meeting, and for Mr. Bosman, Klaas, and Advocate Leroux, who participated in it. It's much appreciated, to be welcomed.
Thank you very much. Members, we'll now move to consideration and adoption of committee meeting minutes. We'll start with the 28th of July. Ms. Kamish Ahmad, if you could flight those minutes for us, please. Ms. Kamish Ahmad? Okay, cool. Right. This is the Friday, 28th of July. That's page 1. Page 2. Thank you very much. That's the minutes of the 28th of July. Can I get a mover, please, for adoption?
Chair, I move that we adopt the minutes.
Thank you very much. I was just going to say that you're the only one who can, because you're the only one present. Sorry, Mr. Vermeulen?
Chairperson, thank you very much. I just want to take the committee back quickly, with your permission, to the resolution that was just taken for the legal opinion.
Yes.
And I'm just thinking aloud, Chairperson. Maybe the committee would want to consider, maybe, or to ask Advocate Leroux by when that opinion could be availed. Because I remember when we dealt with the powers bill, we put a time frame on the request. So at this stage is open-ended, so I'm just asking, Chairperson. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Member Bosman.
Chair, I don't think we need to give a time frame. I think Advocate Leroux is quite studious in his approach, and he will get back to us as soon as it's ready.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I don't think that we can give it a time frame for now. I will leave it in Mr. Advocate Leroux's capable hands and his liaison with the procedural office to furnish us with that legal report, that legal opinion. Thank you. Let's move on to the 25th of August. This was in George, public hearing in George. It's page 1. It's page 2. Can I get a mover, please?
I move that we adopt, Chairperson.
Thank you, Member Bosman. The minutes are so adopted. Now let's move on to the minutes from the 1st of September. It's page 1. That's page 2. Thank you very much. Can I have a mover for them to adopt the minutes, please? It cannot be Member Pretorius or Member Class.
Yes, I move that the minutes being adopted. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Member Class. I appreciate that. Ms. Kamish Ahmed, can we move on to the minutes of 15 September, please? That's page 1. Ms. Kamish Ahmed, I think it's stuck. Oh, no, there we go. Here we go. Page 1. That's page 2. And page 3. Can I have a mover to adopt the minutes, please? Member Pretorius, you're up. Yeah, yes, Member Pretorius. I assume that's.
I was trying to propose. I was trying to propose, Chair.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. The minutes are so adopted. And now we'll move on to the minutes of the 22nd of September. Ms. Kamish Ahmed? There we go. Thank you very much. 22nd September in Paul, last week. We have page 1. Page 2. Thank you very much. Can I have a mover for the minutes, please? Move to adopt. Member Pretorius, thank you very much. The minutes are so adopted. Yes, is there someone who'd like to speak? No? We will now move on to the consideration and adoption of the draft committee quarterly report for April to June 2023. Ms. Kamish Ahmed, if you could flag that for me, please. For us, sorry. Thank you very much. Page 1. Page 2. Page 3. Page 4. Page 5. Page 6. Page 7. Page 8. Page 9. Page 10. Page 11. And then page 12. Page 12. That's the report. Members, can I have a mover for adoption of the report? Members Pretorius or Klaas? Member Pretorius, thank you very much. I appreciate that. The report is so adopted. Member Klaas? Okay, fantastic. Thank you very much. Let me just check my notes quickly, please. Members, if there are no further resolutions or actions, I'd like to thank you for your attendance and for your discussion around the bill that was presented before us. And I wish you a safe and pleasant weekend. And for those of you who are traveling on our roads, please be safe. And we'll see each other shortly. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful weekend. This meeting is adjourned.